Always Mine by Somali W. Chapter 10. Hermione awoke in an empty bed. She leaned into the sheets and ran her hand on the side that Draco had previously occupied. She sat up and tried to listen to any movement outside the room, but heard none. Sighing in disappointment, she muttered with a heavy heart, "Well, I guess this is what a one-night stand with Malfoy feels like." Hermione did not regret what happened. She welcomed it, and he had been magnificent. He had been kissing Ron for ages, but he didn't come close to bringing out the feelings that Draco could. Ron, he thought back angrily. He had some serious explaining and grovelling to do, but she had already decided that he wasn't the one for her. Truth be told, she had known for a while, but when you've been through so much with one person, it just seems like it was meant to be. Slipping on the discarded dress only to cover herself, she made a mad dash towards her room. Uttering the password, "Quills," quickly, she opened the door and headed straight for the bed. Flopping down on the bed, she took in her surroundings. Hermione bit down on her lip and touched her body, where he trailed kiss after kiss. A hot stirring awakened between her legs from just thinking about it. Ever so grateful that it was Saturday, she pushed herself off the bed and headed towards the shared bathroom. Reaching for the knob, the shower came to life. The water felt so good on her spent body. It relaxed her muscles, and the intense throbbing between her legs reduced. Running her fingers through her wet hair, she gently lifted the unruly mess to wash her neck. Their shower time was always special. Spraying generous amounts of lavender-scented body wash onto her loofah, she generously rubbed it along her body. The aroma filled the cubicle, and the water washed away the soapy salts. She pictured him again, and an involuntary moan escaped her mouth. The intense heat was back, transporting her back to the night before. Her fingers touched her sensitive spot slightly, trailed down her flat stomach and towards her already swollen clit. So intent on her pleasure, Hermione did not notice that she was no longer alone. Draco grabbed her wrist and pulled it back from the tight entrance. "That's my job," he whispered, lightly bruising her ear with his kiss. "Draco," she moaned, leaning against his chest. The way his name rolled off her tongue only intensified his longing for her. He slowly kissed her neck, running his hands down her back to her soft buttock. Massaging the silky smooth skin before moving his hand to the front, he placed his thumb on her throbbing clit and rubbed the small bundle of nerves while placing light kisses on her neck. "Tell me what you want, Granger," he growled huskily through clenched teeth. He tried hard to control himself and not just thrust into her. Hermione reached back, grabbed his platinum blonde hat, and laced her fingers through his locks. "Always Draco," she moaned truthfully. That was his undoing. He turned her towards him, roughly cupping her buttocks. He lifted her clean off her feet and pushed her up against the cool tiles of the large cubicle. She wrapped her legs around him willingly as he pinned her to the bathroom wall and ravaged the skin off her neck. The towels felt cool and wet on her back. His hard member pressed into her thigh. She felt his growing need and urgency. Molding her lips with his, he pushed into her. Groaning aloud at the feeling of her warmth closing around his shaft, he took an erect nipple in his mouth and slowly began thrusting. It was still new and it hurt, but she held on and concentrated on the pleasure. Tantalizingly slow, picking up the pace as his need intensified. The pleasure was too much to handle. She bit down on his shoulder and cried, "Don't stop, please, don't stop." The pull to ecstasy was almost upon her. She hovered on the cusp of climax. Breaking away from ravishing her flesh, he stared into her face as the sheer magnitude of her orgasm tore through her. She exploded around him, and he held tightly onto her as her body spasmed out of control. Fuck, that felt good. It was erotic to watch the intense pleasure she was feeling at his hands. Waves of unbridled pleasure pulsated through her. Thoroughly spent, she fell against his firm chest. Draco caught her and grinned, his lips curved upwards happily. Moving with precision, he sped up, pushed deeper, and slammed her against the wall roughly with one final thrust. and spilled himself into her. Groaning and holding onto her tightly, the intensity of his release crippled him momentarily. Letting her down gently, he gathered her in his arms and kissed her full, luscious lips. They showered together, and she finished first. Hermione kissed Draco gently before stepping out of the cubicle, tiptoeing to avoid the water puddles they created. Grabbing a large towel, she tied it around her firmly and leaned against the wall to watch the man who had pleasured her so much. The soap ran down his back. His fingers vigorously shampooed his unique blonde locks. His eyes were closed in concentration while the water washed over his firm, muscled body. She cocked her head to the side and took him in. Had she been that fucking blind? How had she not noticed how handsome he was? No wonder every girl in school wet their knickers for him, and now that she had the taste, she was not about to shout. She had a smile, left the bathroom hurriedly, dressed and went to prepare some much-needed nourishment. Draco pulled on a pair of torn blue jeans, a Muggle invention. His father would have had a heart attack, but who the fuck cared? Pulled a black t-shirt over his head next. There was movement in the kitchen, and he raised his head at the sound of metal banging against ceramic. Hermione seemed to be making tea. The situation at hand was complicated. He never fucking planned on falling for Hermione Granger, but here he was, totally smitten by the woman. He had no bloody clue what he even wanted from her. A girlfriend? His father would murder him. A mere fuckbody? No, she was anything but a one-night stand. He wanted to make her his one and only. There would be no room for sharing. His thoughts spun out of control. Took a deep breath and left his room to face the fierce, passionate Gryffindor. Hermione watched him enter the small kitchen. She sipped her coffee and watched his every movement intently. Should she say something, or would he? Why was he so good-looking? She groaned involuntarily. He turned to face her while adding sugar to his tea, raised an eyebrow and inquired. "You say something, Granger?" Coffee mug. At her lips, she shook her head. Draco laughed softly, closed the distance between them, took the coffee mug out of her quivering hands and placed it on the counter. Towering over her, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and bent down to kiss her softly on the lips. "I think we need to discuss a few things," he said, serious but excitedly. Merlin, he was acting like a love-struck fool. Hermione nodded and replied nervously, "Yes, we do." Took a deep breath and started to speak with a serious edge to his voice. "What do you want from me, Granger?" he firmly said. "Because whatever this is, it's no random shag or one-night stand. I want you with me to be with me." Hermione stared at him, stunned. Was Malfoy asking her to be his girlfriend? His family hated Muggle-borns. He hated and taunted her for years. Had he changed so much after the war? Should she give him the benefit of the doubt? With all this and in misery? So many unanswered questions. Her eyes glazed over. Draco snapped his fingers in front of her face to get her attention. "Hermione, hello? Are you listening to me, you stubborn Gryffindor?" "Huh?" she muttered, snapping back to attention. Taking a deep breath herself, Hermione replied. "Whatever," she emphasized the word he used, "that is happening between us is complicated." His heart sank, but she finished happily. "But I want to be with you too, Draco." She touched his face tenderly. "I know that very much, but if you're with me, there can be no one else." Draco mused. "Oh, no bloody way, Granger. I'm not a one-woman kind of a man." Hermione narrowed her eyes, poked him in the chest and challenged. "You can play that game, and I might play it better than you." She turned to walk away, but he pulled her against him and rasped. "I will always be yours, Granger." She looked at him with big brown eyes and sighed. "I need to speak to Ron." Draco hissed displeasure. "Please tell me you will not continue to be with the weasel." In his moment of bliss, he had forgotten about her cheating, fucking, shit-faced boyfriend. The thought of Weasley touching her drove him to insanity. No way in hell was that red-headed fucktard going to come anywhere near her, especially not after last night. She was his. Her tone softened as she continued. Ron and Harry have been my best friends for the past 7 years. I can't just throw that away and jump into your arms. Her voice pleaded with him to understand. As much as he disliked and hated what she said, he knew it was the truth. They had history, and it was no secret how Potterhead and Weasley shit felt about him. It never made things easy for them, and neither had they. He was a Slytherin, and they were Gryffindors. It was what it was. No point in sugarcoating anything. Draco frowned. So what? Until Father notice I'm your dirty little secret? It annoyed him that he had to remain in the shadows. Hermione closed the distance between them, looked at him seductively, and muttered between kisses. Is that so bad? He pulled her close. No, it's not so bad. I can see the perks already. He stared into her face and warned. But if I see that half-wit touching you, all bets are off. She chuckled. Duly noted, Malfoy. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Always Mine by Samadhi W. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.